the other interesting aspect of that, which we may as well deal with now, relates to what Bob mentioned before we start for coffee, and that's leaf cutting. The reason I was able to do that, not simply to cut one twig off, but actually to use this tree as an illustration for what I was talking about, is that Ian had defoliated this tree. Now, defoliation is an interesting part of bonsai development. It's not something which is totally indispensable. You will pretty much find that a lot of the results of some of the results of defoliation are likely to happen just in the normal course of keeping your bonsai as bonsai. By that I mean small leaves. One of the main reasons people have cited for leaf cutting or defoliation is to have smaller leaves on your bonsai. And it's certainly perfectly true to say that a total defoliation of a tree, with certain reservations, which we'll come to, will result in the second crop of leaves being smaller. Now, because I've got the sort of inquiring mind that asks this, I'd kind of like to know why that happens. My guess is that, bearing in mind that nothing has happened in the evolution of our plants without there being some damn good reason for it happening. So this business of trees losing all their leaves in the middle of the growing season and then growing a whole new set of leaves, don't fall asleep, Stephen. Because it's not good for my confidence, really. I know you got up at 2 o'clock this morning and started work, so there are mitigating circumstances. If you're going to do that, if you're going to sit in the corner.
I tried to, it wasn't allowed to put here.
Sorry. Where was I?
You couldn't see the
Why? Why is it likely that trees have evolved over the millions of years so that when all the leaves come off, for whatever reason they've come off, and not normally because people have come along with pair of scissors and cut them off, why have they evolved so that they produce a second lot of leaves, and the second lot of leaves are smaller? Well, the only thing I can think of is that if animals come along in the late spring and chomp off all the leaves, if they've got great big leaves, then most of the leaves are going to go, especially if it's a giraffe with a big mouth. So it grows a whole new set of leaves, and the leaves are much, much smaller. Perhaps a lot more of the leaves get left when the munching goes on. I don't know. It's a bit crazy idea, really, but I mean, there has to be some.
You're a deep thinker.
There has to be some. I don't even understand what that means. I thought you were just playing a tune. There has to be some reason. Okay, we don't need to know that reason. We don't need to know that reason. We can be happy that it does happen, I suppose, and settle for that. Has anybody got any good ideas why the leaves might be smaller second time around? Better than that? Well, anyway,
That's a good one.
The last time to grow them, so grows wee ones.
It could be that. It could be that. Less time to grow them, so they end up being smaller. But
I always thought that when you did this and took the leaves off it, the tree had actually grown 2 years, not 1 year.
well, you're effectively forcing it to have 2 years growth in one by making it produce a second crop of leaves.
But the tree actually became a year older.
Oh no. You wouldn't find an extra growth ring. For the trees that produces growth rings in the wood, you wouldn't find an extra growth ring, because the tree is setting down the cells that form the wood in exactly the same way, irrespective of how many sets of leaves it's going to have.
When I did that with a sycamore, I find the trunk thickened out.
Do you?
And I've even did it twice in a year, which meant it was getting 3 years.
And the roots only support a certain mass of foliage. chance that if you remove all that foliage, then the roots around the work harder to produce new foliage, something like that?
Yes, that could be tied into it really, although the chances are that if you're talking about the area of leaves produced, 20 small leaves probably end up with the same area as 10 big leaves. I don't know, but in a way, it's speculation. The point is, it happened. The second crop of leaves are going to be smaller. That's one, and it's often been looked at as the main advantage of defoliation. For me, it may be only a relatively small part of why we defoliate. What led me to raise that at this stage is that the advantage of Ian having defoliated this tree was that actually I could look into it and I could see the structure of the tree, and actually if we had the time, then I could actually do a proper structural pruning of this tree and remove branches that I don't think are going to make a good contribution to the secondary and the primary and the ramification of this tree. And of course, if it's got covered with leaves like this, then we can't possibly do that. We just can't see. Now, there's one other big advantage that can accrue from defoliation, and that relates to the roots. Supposing we had a really busy spring and we couldn't repot all our trees properly as we should have done, and one of those trees was this maple, we've actually set this tree back to springtime, before springtime, by defoliating it. It is perfectly safe now to do a proper repot on this tree, to go, taking the old soil off, pruning the roots, back in the soil, back in the pot. Fair enough, maybe we need to concentrate at that stage on even more on repotting aftercare than we would in the spring. We would want to do that in the spring as well, not subjected to severe frost and things. But we might even want to be even more careful. Mind you, of course, the later in the year we do this, then the less chance we have at least of the tree getting frosted for sure. But so that's, there's that. But point being that setting the tree back to spring again means that we can actually do a repot. And the reason why we can do that, because the roots are no longer trying to supply moisture that is being lost through the leaves, because the leaves have gone. Okay, so there is a minimal loss of moisture through the bark. Lenticels are the openings in the bark, and the tree can lose moisture through lenticels. But the tree has quite good control over the opening and shutting of lenticels, so it's much less of a factor than a big, broad, flat area of leaf where moisture, as we said a few minutes ago, can be lost very easily. So that's another benefit that can possibly come through defoliation. So we've got the opportunity to end up with smaller leaves. We've got the possibility of really looking at the branch structure carefully and making some decisions, and we've got the possible benefit, if needed, of actually dealing with roots that got forgotten about or overlooked in the spring. So a lot of good pluses for defoliating of deciduous trees at this time. Now, in my opinion, given that all the variable factors that play into our climate, this would still be the optimum time of the year that we're at now to do a defoliation. Now, I know Ian did some really early defoliation on some trees. You're looking to defoliate at a certain stage in the growing season. Generally, if people are going to put numbers on it, we talk about 6 to 8 weeks into the growing season. But the growing season might start very early with a particular tree that's been overwintered in a greenhouse. It might have been a very mild winter. It might be an incredibly healthy tree. It might be an incredibly early flushing tree, coming into leaf. So all of those things might play into varying the time, the actual time that you think about doing defoliation. What are the factors to bear in mind in terms of the consequences for the tree in the defoliation? Well, the main one is to have sufficient growing season left ahead of it to grow a whole new set of leaves. But more than that, it's got to have time to do a lot more than just simply grow a whole new set of leaves. It's got to do that, and it's got to set the buds in place ready for next spring. Now, that's really important, because sometimes you can get a tree, if you defoliate too late, and I've actually done this myself, you can get a tree that actually sets some buds that would have opened this season if I'd done it early enough, but doesn't open them and sits through the whole winter, the end of the growing season, the autumn, the winter, with that one set of buds, and comes into leaf in the spring. But that tree's going to be weak. It's going to be weak because effectively you've given it only half, or I gave it, only half of a growing season, because I cut all the leaves off halfway through the growing season, or if it was half, the point is I was doing it too late for the tree to actually grow a whole new set of leaves and the buds for next year. So it just simply grew the buds for next year and then didn't do anything else. So it's not going to be strong next year. It's going to be something you need to look at quite carefully in that sense. Even if it grows a whole new set of leaves, it must still have enough time to actually set the buds that it will use next spring. But it needs to set those buds this year, because for sure it's not going to set them during the winter when growth ends. So a few things to think about. And also playing into that is, do you defoliate more than once in one growing season? Well, plenty of people do. Mr. Young?
Yep, tridents.
I have to say I have reservations about multi-defoliation in the British growing season.
But mine aren't outside.
Yeah, that's the thing. There are so many factors that play into what's safe and what isn't safe to do. I mean, not least of which, of course, is Ian's own experience in bonsai and understanding, knowing his trees. It's all part of what feeds into making decisions about what you do and don't do. The general rule that I think of applies in this case is the known fact that by and large, in the north of the United Kingdom, applies to me as much as it does to you here in Northern Ireland, our growing seasons are pretty damn short. One of the problems that we have with some Japanese imported bonsai is that the growing season in Japan, where these trees have evolved over thousands, if not millions of years, is much longer than we have in here. For instance, it's a tree, a native tree for them, Zelkova serrata, an absolute classic, beautiful tree to make bonsai from. They get hugely more growth from Zelkova than we're ever going to get in the United Kingdom. So that helps them do loads in terms of developing the tree. You see Zelkova serratas very often in Japan in the very shallowest of containers, and the trees are still growing like mad and they're perfectly healthy, and that's a factor of great high light level, great humidity, high temperature, just everything the tree loves. It's very often not a good idea to keep Zelkova in this country in such shallow containers. They want a little bit more space for the roots to grow in. And we don't get that kind of growth on a lot of the Japanese imported trees. We can still do them, we can still keep them, we can still develop them as bonsai, But we have to bear in mind that things are not like they are in Japan, weather-wise, for us. Now, if you use good use of a polytunnel or good use of a greenhouse, you understand your trees very well, you've got the sort of experience that Ian has under his belt, then multi-defoliation of a healthy and a known vigorous species. Trident maple is known, it's been grown as bonsai for hundreds of years now. There's a lot of experience and knowledge goes behind it.